In today's video, we're going to build a reptile first aid kit. Now today's video is not a replacement for veterinary care. You should absolutely seek out a veterinarian. But this is exactly what it says on the tin, first aid. This is there for when something happens to your reptile, maybe it gets injured or sick. This is your first response to stabilize, help your animal for you to eventually get to a vet. Or let's say there's a period where you have to travel a long period to get to a veterinarian, or you're on a waiting list to see the vet. This is things you can do in the meantime to help your animal. So we're going to start with some really obvious things like gloves. If you want to get in there with wounds or any scratches that you need to treat or you need to restrain an animal, you want to make sure that you've got clean hands and you're not introducing anything negative to an animal's injury site or anything like that. The same goes for something like simple as tongs. Now these tongs can be dedicated to your first aid kit, so they're not used anywhere else, and then you can actually disinfect these properly and leave them back in your first aid kit. And that's really important to isolate those for the first aid kit. It's always best to have those on hand. Now this first aid kit, what you're going to want is a little box to keep your first aid kit in, but the box itself is going to act as an area for you to soak an animal, to contain an animal for treatment, to isolate them so that you can apply treatment and make sure that they're kept clean whilst you're applying that first aid. So this doubles up as a storage container for your first aid kit, and it's something that you can use for maybe soaking or treating an animal. You're going to want simple things like cotton buds for when you want to apply things to areas. That's going to be really key. Things like syringes. Syringes are really key for applying maybe some meds, maybe flushing out a wound. That's really, really key. And different size ones. Maybe you want something like a tiny little 1 ml syringe. That can be really important with force feeding or assist feeding, or again, flushing out a wound or applying meds. And speaking of flushing out a wound, something like saline solution. So it is safe for you to flush out a wound before you apply any sort of treatment to that area, or even just clean an area where you're going to flush out that wound, clear it of debris, and you know that you're doing it properly with saline solution. And that saline solution can be applied with syringes and other things like that too, because squirting that through this is going to apply that pressure to clear away debris from a wound site essentially. Now, since we're on the topic of wounds, let's talk about a wound site. So typically what I would use in the past and what many reptile keepers use is something like this, which is tamidine. Now this is an iodine-based solution that you would apply to an area with something like cotton pads or earbuds like this and apply it to a wound site. Now this is incredibly staining. It's going to affect thyroid function in frogs. So this is really what we had. But what you would do is apply this to the area. It doesn't really cause much damage. You clean the area, you mean that it's going to stay on there, it's going to dry and stain the area. And you're going to apply this and it's going to basically sanitize and keep the area clear from any sort of like bacterial infections that might manifest. But nowadays what we have are things like this. What we have is lucillin. Now lucillin is a top tier topical disinfectant. Now, unlike the tamidine for applying to a wound site, it's clear, it doesn't stain, it doesn't matter if it's consumed, it's not going to affect thyroid function. It is simply just non-toxic, non-itchy, it's clear, it just looks like water. What it is, it contains something called hypochlorous acid. This hypochlorous acid is what's excreted by mammalian white blood cells in the immune system. So effectively, this is basically how immune response works. It's 300 times more effective than bleach at killing germs. The nice thing about lucillin is you don't have to put it on a cotton bud to apply it. You can spray it. It doesn't matter if it goes in water because you can drink it because it's literally just white blood cell secretions. I can spray it in my mouth, my eyes is absolutely fine. This can actually be used as eye drops. You can use that after you've flushed out a wound. That's going to aid in the recovery of that wound site as well as keep it clean. It's bactericidal, it's fungicidal, and it's virucidal. Now this one's a real good one because not only is it good for the topical wounds and things like that and used in a first aid kit, but it also can be used as a disinfectant. Hypochlorous acid, which is in lucillin, has had some effect in studies at dealing with cryptosporidium. It will do nidovirus. It will do adenovirus. Now with the cryptosporidium, in the studies found that 2 parts per million of hypochlorous acid deactivated the oocysts of Cryptosporidium by around sort of like 49% or something around that, the late 40s% anyway. Now in lucillin, it's 300 ppm. So if 2 ppm is like 49% deactivation rate, what does 300% do? Of course, disclaimer, it's never been properly formally tested for Cryptosporidium, but 2 ppm in studies of hypochlorous acid has done relatively good things, and this is 300, so something to keep in mind. If you're in a professional environment, there's no cost requirements because it isn't a hazardous substance. You could drink the whole bottle if you wanted to, you'd be absolutely fine. Honestly, it's wonderful. You can find this stuff linked on Amazon down below. Now, both tamidine and lucillin are going to be there to clear up that wound site. They're going to make sure it's sanitized. They're going to stop infections. But as that dried, you're going to have to reapply the next time you want to. That's where things like F10 ointment, where it's like a cream. If I open this up, there it is, F10. If you look inside, it's halfway used. It's a bit grimy, this one, but for showcase purposes, it's fine. It's basically the same texture as like petroleum jelly. There it is on there. You can apply that to a wound site, and what that's going to do is be topical. It's going to stay on there, and it's going to stop anything from getting contact with that wound site and then reinfecting after something's deactivated. But saying that, lucillin is very, very effective, so you can just keep applying lucillin daily and have the sort of same effect. Okay, so what if we're looking at like eye problems, or if we've got something like a shedding problem, well, something like Ocrogel, which is really, really good. Here's Ocrogel. Now this is actually, it comes in a little tube, I've got it here. This is actually for, you know, eye problems, and you can put it in an animal's eye. Now you can use lucillin as eye droplets as well, but what this is a little bit of a different texture. So I'll squirt it out here on my hand so you can see it. This is a real empty tube, so it's probably a bad example, but if I try and squeeze some out, there we go. You can see where it's coming up like a, try and get that to show, it's like a gel, and if I move it around, it stays. It's very good at being a lubricant. So if you've got like tiny little geckos where they've got like stuck shed on their feet, and you can't restrain something bigger like a crested gecko and use something like this, and you'll get some of this, you'll be like rubbing the foot. If it's something tiny like Ligodactylus or really tiny micro geckos, you can just squirt this all over their feet, and what that's going to do is they're going to walk through it, and it gets their feet nice and lubricated, and it stays for quite a while before it ever dries up. And you can apply that daily and keep that foot lubricated. And then you can also use something like lucillin as well to be spraying sites to disinfect and keep things nice and clean and aid in recovery when it can. So what about if you've got an animal that is like not eating and it might be losing weight, and you've got a while before you can get to a vet, and you just need to get that animal to take and keep on weight? Well, things like this, like carnivore care. This is emergency food to keep weight on animal. This is for carnivore, so I'm using this on snakes. This is in sort of like a powdered format, the same way you have like crested gecko food in that powder. And you would mix that in with water into solution, and then draw that up into a syringe, probably the skinnier one than this, the little syringe here. You would draw that up into this syringe, and then you would maybe assist feed into a mouth and squirt that down the mouth based on the amount that it says on the packet. Now you can get carnivore ones, omnivore ones, herbivore ones. So something like critical care, which is like a first aid, emergency aid feed, would be really, really beneficial to keep in your first aid kit. And then when you're done, you take it all, pop it back in here, or your saline, your Ocrogel, or your syringes, pop it back in your tub. La la la, there it goes. And we got our little first aid kit. And of course, lucillin is the heavy hitter out of this whole thing. So lucillin you can find on Amazon, listed down below. I'm going to try and make sure that I can include most of what I've got in this first aid kit listed down below, or in our Amazon storefront, listed in our first aid kit category. If not, you can only buy one. The syringes and stuff you'll find in your own country, but this is the one to buy. So Put your first aid kit together, you never know when you're going to need it. This stores for like nearly 24 months if kept cool and dark. Check out down below and I'll see you in the next video.